Paul.
Thank you, Chair. This paper sets out for us the proposed programme of both the revenue-funded asset maintenance programme and the general fund capital programme, predominantly for 25-26, but also an indication of the future years too. Paragraph 6 onwards gives more details of each project that's been submitted for inclusion, and essentially it's a case of prioritising that spend and those projects in line with the funding we have available. A few things to note within the asset maintenance programme is that we have maintained the level of support for our health and leisure centres at £750,000. There is an upgrade to the fuel tank at Marsh Lane Depot, budgeted at £130,000. Further to our investment in the new Hardley Depot, there was an allowance of £75,000 to support improved welfare facilities across our other depot sites. There's essential repairs to the CCTV roof office roof, costing £65,000. And then there's the usual cyclical investment in our ICT equipment, vehicles and plant assets. And finally, there's an inclusion of a small £30,000 contingency budget, which brings us back to the £2.5 million total, which is the same figure as in the current year. The report also includes a number of schemes that were discounted and not able to be included at this stage due to the funding restrictions. And many of these, though, will have their own separate business cases and will be brought back to members in future for decisions at that point in time. The second part of the report refers to the capital programme for 25-26, and as detailed in Appendix 2, this totals £19.4 million. Almost £2.5 million are for replacement of vehicles and plant, excluding the waste strategy, and there is £8.3 million supporting the waste strategy for the vehicles and also the new bin containers throughout the year. Members will also note the proposed amendment to the refurbishment budget at Appletree Court and the reduction from the £1.75 million previously approved to £200,000. This is due to the original business case assumptions, including the income that would be generated over a 7-year period, now being impacted by the recent devolution discussions. Further schemes within the programme include many that benefit from external funding, and these include disabled facilities grants, coastal schemes, and the use of seal money and developer contributions. So those are the proposals for the 25-26 year. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions from the floor? Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I have two questions, I guess, if I can. Under item 14, 14 on page 8, the programme contingency of 30,000. I mean, this is 1% of the total. I mean, it's hardly a contingency. I mean, are there not contingencies already in the figures? I mean, why have we added in 30,000? It strikes me it's just it's something to round it up. Is that it?
It is linked to the available funding that we have, so that is true. Each of the schemes do have an element of prudency built into them, and this just gives an extra bit of cover for those that may materialise during the year, either as a new scheme or in addition to those that have already been put forward.
Okay, I mean, okay, I'm not convinced, really. And my second question is on the Ealing Tide Toll Bridge and Quayside repairs, which is shown here as £260,000. How has this figure been arrived at? This is on page 11, item 38.
So the services they've considered the options and, reviewed what's required at this stage, and that's the determination from the service in terms of the investment required to bring it back to its state.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Sorry, just the services have done a review and considered what's required at this stage to bring the Ealing Tide Mill back into working operations and the repairs around the quayside.
Okay, is this our officer's estimation or a consultant or what?
As far as I understand, our officers have done a survey and considered what's required.
Well, I think I would quite like to see that estimate. Because I think, 260,000 seems quite an exact figure. And how's that been built up?
Yeah, Chairman, if I can actually offer just a little bit more added detail to that. So we have actually gone out and got a firm tender position for some of the work. So in terms of the toll bridge itself, we know we've got a fixed tendered sum for that. So that's 60,000 of the 260. And that's in addition to 40,000 we've already got. So we know that the tendered value of the works is just shy of £100,000 for the toll bridge. So we've allowed 100,000, so a small contingency. The remaining 200,000 then in that particular project, which is for the urgent works for the maintenance of the tide mill itself, that has been backed with a third-party consultative piece who came out with a very detailed and structured maintenance plan over the next sort of 1 to 5 years. And the emergency works element was basically down to the 200,000, which is now what's being put into the budget. So more than happy to share some more detail with you post-meeting. But yeah, both elements are backed up through third-party costings as well as our own.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Councillor Alex Wade, Hive Central. With regards to the originally budgeted 1.75 million, which has been dropped to 200,000, I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that 1 million might go into contingency already from that. But what is going to be used with that, 1.55 million or remaining amount? And have there been opportunities to look at where that can move into other areas, such as with the capital spend, maybe with any of our waste strategy or our service and vehicles, or even other areas such as SIL or community grant projects, or is that going back into reserves, for example? On number 45, it mentions a separate report to do with SIL funding. Will that be coming to this committee at a later stage? And my final point is, with regards to, obviously, devolution, somewhat throwing a spanner in the works, to do with original plans for Apple Tree Court, has that impacted any of the external consultancy contracts that we've had, and has there been any opportunity to recuperate any money now that that is certainly on hold? Thank you.
Okay. I'd say in reverse order, the latter is still quite early stages, as you'll be well aware, in terms of devolution, so nothing has tangibly changed in terms of any recalls for changes to those works and money spent. Clearly, we won't proceed with anything that's not been considered in light of the new potential direction of travel. Moving to the SIL report, as you mentioned, apologies, I'm not sure if it comes to this committee. Maybe Alan could correct.
No, I think the place and operations panel will consider the SIL report.
Thank you for that. And then returning back to the Apple Tree Court adjustment, I'm not aware £1 million has been put into contingency. I'm not sure where that information came from, but the business case originally was funded through the income stream, which was going to make the borrowing affordable. Without that income stream now materialising, the money isn't really easily available to deploy to something different unless there's a way of funding that additional borrowing. So at this point in time, we're pausing. We appreciate there's a piece of work that can be done to improve the facilities, hence the reduced budget. But in terms of reapplying the rest of the funds, it's quite difficult at this stage, subject to a funding source.
Councillor Wood.
I stand in awe of people who put financial plans together, and also accountants. And as a reasonably new member of this committee, I did struggle reading through the agenda. So I apologise if my questions are a little bit simple. But for item 12, what is the 40,000 that is replacement of wireless access points, and what are wireless access points?
The question may not be IT. I don't know if Becky can help me here, given.
In the absence of an IT person, I'll offer an answer to that. So our wireless points are located all around our building and enable us to use these devices in this way without docking them in effect. Those sockets become redundant to our existing ones, so they basically become out of use, so they need replacing. So that's what the £40,000 does.
It seems an awful lot of money to me to plug in your computer, but there we are. Also, item 20, public conveniences, which are so important to all our residents. Can you explain why that has been put on hold or will be considered as part of broader future asset management? Why isn't there a budget for those every year?
You're quite right, there isn't a standing budget for those items and need to be considered in the round as they weren't statutory requirement or any health and safety requirements specific to those. The priority of other schemes came first in terms of the budget available. We're about to embark on an asset management strategy piece with a new member of staff, and these things will be considered in the round for that and investments put forward as appropriate with the funding available.
So will that be in the coming year, will it? That will be considered in this coming year, in this coming financial year?
The strategy will come forward in this forthcoming year, and subject to the outcomes of that, then things may progress.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Councillor Jack Davis, Peddington. On the vehicle fleet replacement, one of the comments that I get quite a lot at Lymington is that a lot of NFDC vehicles are left rusting and growing moss in the council car park there and haven't moved for a long time. So obviously there's an asset replacement strategy, but what about a vehicle disposal strategy? Because obviously I'm getting comments from residents about this, and it kind of makes the council look bad if they're just leaving parts of the car park at the town hall to effectively be a scrapyard for council vehicles. Is there a council disposal strategy? What plans have you got to remove the no longer used vehicles at Lymington?
Thank you. I think historically we typically try to auction off old vehicles as part of the replacement programme, but it's something I can definitely take back to the service and give a more fulsome answer to their intentions to that.
On the public conveniences item, obviously you've got nothing budgeted and it's going to be part of an asset review strategy or whatever. But obviously this council won't exist in 2 years. So it does feel like you're just waiting until the next council comes in to decide that. Obviously public conveniences are something that are very easily transferred across to another council if needs be. Are there any plans to dispose of them before this new council takes over to town and parish councils, or is that something that you'll be doing, or are you going to wait and see what happens with the new authorities?
There are no plans at this stage. I mean, the strategy may determine what could happen prior to any devolution and LGR outcomes, but at this point in time, there's no decisions been made.
So can I just add a further comment on that as well, just in terms of the time frame for this particular report? So we started this process in the autumn, so before any noise and the white paper. Obviously that didn't come out until kind of the 16th of December. So by then we'd already kind of gone through our standard process of prioritisation and projects. Obviously what we now need to do is effectively take stock post devolution and post the LGR review and white paper. But in the interim, what we did do, we have effectively doubled the planned maintenance budget within the public conveniences. So there is an amount available now to the service for ongoing repairs and maintenance and planned maintenance. But yeah, it's important that we now take stock based on what we know from the LGR context.
Councillor Wade.
Yes, just I appreciate you might not know the answer to this, but is there any risk that the UK Shared Prosperities Fund and the Disabled Facilities Grant Funds, which are scheduled here to go up to 27-28, is there any risk with the wider changes? And maybe it's something to, and many of the many questions for officers to ask, that might change or be reviewed within the endless devolution questions, because obviously we've got it budgeted in for the next 3 financial years, but is there a risk that might not be there, or in a different amount, or in a different location?
I would say there's a small bit risk. Based on my previous experience, though, these things tend to see themselves through in the new authority, whatever guise that may become. So the commitment is where I've been previously has always been met, and therefore I would put it at minimal risk of this changing.
We'll always need clean waste vehicles, whoever's here.
Thank you. Obviously, I think you've still put 200 grand in the budget for Appletree Court refurbishments. Have you received assurances, obviously, about the future of Appletree Court? Because if we're going to spend the money, it's possibly not a good idea if we don't know it's going to stay.
There's been no clarity at all on any, and there's no detail in terms of devolution and the future of any assets. This is one of the many things that will come in the forthcoming months. But the works we're looking to do needs to be scoped out properly and will just be those that are urgent, immediate, and benefit our staff now and in the forthcoming year.
Councillor Alvin.
Thank you. Yeah, just another simple question, really. Appendix 1 to this paper, which is the General Fund Asset Maintenance Replacement Programme. In 25-26, we have 750,000 in for health and leisure centres, and then nothing in the following 2 years. I mean, is that just because we're going to stop, assuming devolution goes ahead, or what does that mean?
No, you'll note for future years the total £2.5 million has been maintained, and at present it's just sat within the contingency line until the usual process of considering what we need goes through and those decisions are made. So it's highly likely that those things will continue along with the ICT equipment replacement cycle. But those decisions, that process hasn't been.
Are you saying there is no commitment to spend 750,000, but is that like an upper limit of what we might spend on the health?
We have contractual obligations with the health and leisure centres from a from a landlord responsibility, but there is a forward plan which may vary the amount required. So that would be considered and reconfirmed each year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul, for those answers. So we'll just go to recommendations. Recommendation 1, which is the schedule of projects, should be in Appendix 1 and 2. Should go onwards consideration for the Cabinet. And then item 2, you've got A, B, C and D. Everyone agreed? Thank you. It's still on to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. So this item sort of naturally flows from the previous one. Taking into consideration the capital programme over the period for the General Fund and the HRA, there's a total of £126 million. The HRA aspects were discussed at last night's scrutiny. It's a fairly technical report in the appendices, but I think members should focus on Table 1 under paragraph 7, which lays out the intention to spend £50 million in 25-26, a further 38 in 26-27, and a £37 million expectation in 27-28, with the majority of that in the housing revenue account. Equally, if I could bring members' attentions to Table 2, this shows the changing landscape of the council and its reliance on debt. You'll notice that last year in 23-24, the figure was just under 9 million, and the expectation for 25-26 to fund the capital programme is now just under 23 million. We're still reliant on external sources and grants where we can. We still receive capital receipts, and we use internal contributions, where possible. But the debt need is definitely increasing as our CFR increases over the period. So just wanted members to be mindful of that and just note the strategy in place and the funding options that we are bringing to fund the capital programme over the term. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Councillor Davies.
Now, this might not be the correct. I'm not a financial expert, and Alan will probably correct me if I'm wrong. But business rates reset was a big thing for this council in terms of the risk to the budget and all the capital strategy. What impact, or are we still expecting that impact to be the same? Or it's difficult with local government reorganisation to really know what's going to happen, but are we still expecting that to happen?
The short answer is yes. What we know is that there is a commitment for the new government to confirm the fair funding review. They've said they're going to start that in the spring, with a conclusion into the autumn for the readiness of a multi-year settlement thereafter. Again, with everything else that the government have now got committed to and confirmed, there's potential that might still further slip. But at this point in time, yeah, we're still expecting a business rate reset to take effect from 27-28.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, this is going to perhaps open a can of worms, but under item 50, other liabilities, the statement is that the council is committed to making future payments to cover its pension fund liability, which have been estimated at £12 million as at the 31st of March. Now, I'm assuming this is because of actuarial changes in pension liability, people living longer, whatever. And I wonder whether we should instead be looking, rather than a defined benefit scheme, whether we should be looking at a defined contribution scheme which would avoid these liabilities in the future.
Yeah, Chairman, if I can just provide a comment on that one. As you know, Councillor, we are part of the Hampshire Local Government Pension Scheme, so it's not within our gift to decide and determine the terms of that particular scheme. The 12 million on our balance sheet is our existing liability. The council is paying a fixed contribution as our employees towards that scheme, and as I say, we don't particularly have a say in that. So that will continue. Again, who knows what the future may hold in terms of the future of pension schemes under the new organisation, but for now, we don't have a lot of choice. We continue to pay what we're required to pay.
Yeah, I understand that, and obviously for current staff, we could not change that pension arrangement, but I think it's something that at least I want to put it in people's minds that in the future it might be beneficial to this council to change from a defined benefit scheme to a defined contribution scheme for new staff. Anyway, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woods.
Again, another question to understand the paperwork. Can I ask, you say in number 11, bids are collated by the Chief Financial Officer and reviewed collectively by the Capital and Change Delivery Board. And then, but you don't mention the bids in this paper. When will we find out about those bids? And can you give me a little bit more detail of how it works?
So this sort of refers to the previous paper, so that the ones that were included as part of the 2.5 million and the 19.4 million pound capital programme were considered by this board, and those items listed that were deferred for additional business cases.
Will I be able to find that on the website somewhere?
It's the previous paper the previous paper we discussed contains a lot of the details.
Right, okay.
And it's an annual process, and we'll do the same for next year. Hence the comment made earlier around the 750,000. That's where that will be considered for future years as well.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you.
Councillor Wade.
Thank you. Two questions. Firstly, the one I'm sure you've probably answered, but just for clarity, with regards to the total budget for 25-26 being just over 50 million, is there any particular reason that if I was asked by a member of the public, I could shortly explain to them why it then drops by 11.5 to 26-27 and then a slight small amount 27-28? What would be like the core free takings? I would explain why there's such a drop.
Paul, microphone.
Apologies, yeah. There's a significant amount with the waste strategy in terms of the bins and the new vehicles. So that is the spike in this year, and that obviously isn't required in future years to the same level. So that's the biggest drop off.
Thank you. That was what I was considering, but I thought I thought there might have been something else that I'd missed. But thank you for that. And my second point regarding the housing revenue account. Is that budgeted with the original plan of the council to hit that 600 house target 18 to 26? And if we've you know, for reasons beyond our control, we're not hitting that, is that money being carried over, or are we reducing that in any way, or is that providing us with a slightly larger budget for future years to hopefully hit the higher targets? As I understand, obviously we've not been as successful as we wish to be in new sites, but therefore that's unspent money in theory.
Yeah, in effect, the budget is the budget, and the profiling is somewhat dynamic at times in terms of opportunities and the ability to deliver. So that is the intention, but there is some flex in terms of where it would move and where it would land in terms of the actual delivery.
So we won't use the fact that we might have only built 50 when we wanted 80. I'm not gone, okay, let's keep it at 50. We are still being ambitious and trying to hit the target, but maybe moving it year on year.
Yeah, the strategy is there to deliver those targets. So it's the profiling may flex slightly, but that's just the nature of the beast, I'm afraid.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. On the table 5 of 24, talk about right to buy and receipts from that. Does that go into HRA eventually, or is that something that's used to then? Because it feels like if it's related to housing, surely that should go back to housing.
Yes, those funds will support the housing programme.
Thank you.
Good. That's all the questions. Thank you very much. We go to the recommendations, which is on page 3. And so there's item 1 and item 2 with an A. I don't know what is an A. Who's agreed with those? Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. We'll now move on to item 6, which is the transformation programme, and I think that's Becky and Ingrid.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members. So before I hand over to Ingrid, I wanted to update you on our thoughts around the Future New Forest programme, considering the devolution and reorganisation discussions and following the transformation member steering board last week. So, Zach, if you could go to the 3rd slide. If I just talk you through some bullet points. So in terms of reflecting and reshaping the transformation programme, considering local government reorganisation, so the Future New Forest programme will continue, and there's good reasons for that, but we need to reflect and refocus our transformation priorities. So this is, as you all appreciate, this is new information. It's all happening quite quickly, and it's right that we take time to reflect on those priorities. So we still intend to focus our benefits on residents. So the customer strategy and the customer first digital project will continue. So we're committed to modernising the experience for our customers and our residents, making it as easy as possible for people to contact us, to do business with us, and investing in that technology, improving the processes, making sure that staff are comfortable in that new technology space are all still remain priorities for us. There are vital upgrades and key system replacements that we need. One of them is the customer relationship management system, so the CRM system. So we'll be looking to replace that system and to modernise our customer offering. But there are other key systems that need replacing. So housing maintenance is one, and the regulatory service system is another. So these both areas still remain key priority areas, but we will take stock of what some of that technology might look like. So we might just pause and understand what we need in the short, medium, long term for those areas. So the people strategy will move to a more short-term delivery approach. So the people strategy has been drafted, it's been considered in draft form by various panels. It's due to go to Cabinet in April for adoption, and it remains a really important piece of work. So we still want to attract and retain the best people, and we still want to be able to support our staff, and even more importantly, to be well positioned for future opportunities. So that's around skills development, particularly around digital skills, around learning and development opportunities. What we're doing now, though, is revisiting the action plan and refining it over a shorter delivery period. So what can we deliver in the next 2 to 3 years that really positions our staff in the best possible place? We need to refocus the asset work. So we will be revisiting the recommendations from the MACE report and refocusing our efforts around assets in a new context, potentially, so with a local government reorganisation context. So this, again, remains a really important element of the Future New Forest programme. So some aspects of the programme will need to pause until we're clear on the future direction, and we've already talked about the accommodation review, so the Appertree Court works needing to pause, and there will be other elements of the programme that it's not right to continue with, but again, we need some time to reflect on that. And ultimately, we need to revisit the business case. So we brought the business case forward in August last year for adoption. Now, those savings in the business case will no longer materialise unless we can complete the whole transformation programme. But it's really important that we still continue with the modernisation of our technology, our processes and our working practices to position the whole organisation in the best possible way for those future opportunities. So the emphasis will shift from an invest to save to an invest to modernise, but we'll come back to panel and to members with a reprioritised programme of works for Future New Forest. So I'll hand over to Ingrid now, who's going to talk to you just very briefly, because we brought an update in November, on some of the work that's happening now, because there's a lot of work happening in this space, but also some of the work that we're thinking probably will be paused, but just a very brief update.
Thank you, Becky. Yes, so we thought it'd be useful to take you through the structure of the projects and work packages that we've got sat under each of our themes around transformation, but also in our operational areas. So to start with, the definition of these two different things, projects and work packages, for anyone that isn't clear on those. Projects are multiple objectives that are likely to be delivered over a number of months to years and require a whole team to work on those. So corporate services, HR, legal and a projects team alongside lots of different operational teams. So complex packages of work, and you need a closer level of planning and budgeting with those and being much clearer on purpose and delivery around benefits. Whereas work packages are often quite contained small improvements that can be delivered by one team or a couple of teams. It's one or two objectives, normally delivered within weeks and months, not years. And they're easier for us to deliver out. So in terms of priorities and scale, it's useful for us when we're in planning to break them down so we understand resourcing requirements and how to plan them in against each other. So if we look first at our people and capabilities, you can see across this slide, what we've done is identify all the work we're doing, and then we've highlighted in yellow the ones that we're actively working on at the moment and supporting and reporting through our governance, and the ones that we're considering in light of devolution and the conversations that are going on, and making sure that we keep an agile approach to those in case we need to switch up how we're going to deliver. So in our people and capability space at the moment, we're really focused on that great place to work, grow, connect and empower. So really making sure our people feel confident and capable, delivering now and in whatever the future brings, and that they have the right skills for their jobs, and that we are keeping up to date with what else they might need in terms of delivery. And it's all around that employer of choice. So what makes us a great place to work that people would recommend. And we're still acting on our staff survey results and developing our Change Champions network. So there's lots still going on in that space, and we'll continue to develop that. So you can see at the moment we're not working on comms and engagement approach, but that is scheduled in for Q3 of year one. So this work's all planned in, it just might not be in flight at the moment. Customer continues, so we'll be delivering improvements for our customers, that self-serve portal, making it a lot easier to get in touch and get what they need. But we'll be making sure that we keep an eye to the future with that work. So we won't want to disrupt structures and teams as they're set out at the moment unless we really have to, and it will deliver very clear benefits across that. We're also going to do some technology proofs of concept, so looking at what's available through our Microsoft stack that we're not using at the moment, and what improvement we could bring to bear in quite a light touch way through the software and technology we've already got. We have highlighted there the ATC accommodation review in red, as that's likely to pause at the moment. But in terms of our other asset management approaches, we're continuing with those. It's important to have that full profile of what we have as an organisation. And we're also looking at where we can bring rapid improvement to bear now for problems that we're seeing around reporting and making sure that we're making things as manual, as less manual as possible, and bringing, again, automation where we possibly can. And then our finance and delivery, which is all around tracking, has probably got the biggest challenge at the moment based on changes we know are likely to the business case. What does that mean in terms of how we plan out those benefits and when we'll be realising those and able to report them back to panels such as this one as well. And we'll continue to improve budget processes and internal processes that impact our customers and our financial stability. Could I have the next one, please, Sam? And then in our operational areas,
Thank you.
apologies, just a second.
It's nice to see it laid out like this.
Thank
It makes
you.
it so much easier for us to see.
And we'll, of course, share that with you, so you'll get a bit of time to read some of those details. And any questions on any abbreviations I may have inadvertently used, please come back to me, but I've endeavoured to not do that. So this is our operational area. So alongside the work we're doing as part of that high-level transformation, the enterprise-wide things that will impact everyone and deliver great benefits for customers, we've got lots of improvements happening in our operational areas as well, which may not be fully covered in detail in the documents you've already seen. So asset inspection regimes, making sure that our regulatory services project is moving forward, because we know we have drop-dead dates around that, and making sure that we are improving processes for customers that were identified as part of our consultancy work as quick wins. So we'll still be focusing in on those as well. And in our housing world, we've got a lot of technology to deliver. We've got elements of legacy software that we need to replace fairly urgently. And then we've got other things that we might want to take a longer term view of. So we'll continue to discuss that. And again, being very careful about the conversations we have around bringing together a customer experience team and making sure that we're not disrupting the lives of our workforce before anything really needs to happen. So thank you for your time. That's my overview.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions on? Councillor Wade.
I do appreciate, firstly, that such a project has somewhat had a giant spanner in the works, which is out of your control, which has impacted you and the entire staff. So we do completely understand that. I just wondered, with regards from the staff survey and engagement, which was going really, really well, and I know you reported on it at panel before the new year, if there was if it was valuable to sort of go back to that and see how many of our staff are impacted by the recent news and the lack of answers and the lack of reassurance and concern about what may happen moving forward. And that starts from the very top down all the way through the levels of the staff who could be impacted and have no answers, as no one has any answers so far, and whether that's impacted some of the staff survey and wellbeing discussions, and if that is indeed linked, as you say, to the discussions that you've been having about recruiting and retaining people, and whether people are less reassured about wanting to develop here and are looking elsewhere, or indeed are thinking, okay, it might take a few years like most of these things do, and whether there's people, the skill set that we want to keep might be at risk of moving because of this lack of clarity about future roles.
Does Kate want to come in on that?
Becky might want to come in in terms of the sort of links into the programme and supporting engagement through the programme. I think just to reassure members, the staff briefings that I've undertaken myself have been really, really well attended. So over half of staff. I know that we still need to reach our operational teams in different ways. So we're looking at how we build in different briefings going forwards. We've also got a rolling Q&A because there are lots and lots of questions, some of which perhaps have unclear answers at this point in time, but it's still worth actually answering the question, even if all we're able to say at the moment is that that's not something at this point in time we can answer. So people have asked us about the future sort of work locations. People have asked us what a future council might decide as a priority. You know, you can imagine the sort of questions that do come from staff, but I think from our perspective, it's about providing what information we do know, and there is a reassurance that actually the process takes quite a lot of time. There is, you know, 2-3 years before there's anything new, and then, you know, the process of then bringing together systems, teams, structures, policies and processes again takes a piece of time. So you're probably looking at a whole change process of 10 years. So I think some of it's about providing the evidence from elsewhere and the experience that we've got actually across the organisation of change, and we're just sharing that as we go. But I don't know, Becky, do you want to say in terms of the programme thinking?
Yeah, particularly around the people strategy. So the people strategy has got a big element of employee engagement, you know, and that was in the strategy ahead of the recent developments. But that, you're right, that's going to become even more important. So we were already looking at how we support our staff through change management. And this is now with a different context. So I was in the Change Champions group yesterday, so that's got representatives from services across the whole organisation, and our deputy leader attends as well as our member champion. And we had our second session of change management training there, and it was about how you support staff through change and what that feels like. We're also doing a session with the leadership team on the 4th of February to make sure that they start understanding that change curve and how we best support staff. But the people strategy definitely makes provision for really strong employee engagement to make sure that our staff feel really, really engaged, really well informed and really well supported.
Thank you, because obviously looking at the KPI of percentage of roles not filled, obviously that's something that we'll have to keep an eye on, and particularly if it's key positions within the council or operational, not to mention the concern of loss of valuable skill set, because obviously, you know, we are a rural council, you know, we want to get the very best to come work here, but people might be put off by working for a local government organisation when everything's up in the air. Just two other sort of small quick wins that I wanted to add, which you're probably already doing, is that with the asset strategy management, anything where there's a one access or one person's responsible for resolving it, that's always something that on a various factors. I remember reading one of the reports about, I think it was crossing over with facilities and housing, and where something was reported and there was sort of an opportunity to things to get lost within the reporting process, and making sure we've got a multitude of people, particularly in the current climate, with access and the ability to respond and react. You know, long-term absence is a good example. And also, from a recent issue in my area, if customer services and councillors are sharing a particular matter and sending the same message repeatedly, if they're doing that and our customer service are sending the same message out, what can we send out earlier to save the time? You don't need to know what I'm talking about, but it seems to me that if we're repeating ourselves endlessly, what could we have done at the beginning to mitigate that and prioritise other key tasks and make a better use of time? So that would be something that I would suggest moving forward.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the change now. I mean, when this first came to us, the transformation process, it was headlined as invest to save. And I've picked up now that it's changed from that to invest to modernise. Now, that strikes me that we're still planning on spending the same amount of money, but the benefits are no longer coming through as cost benefits. And I would just like to get an update. I realise there's a problem at the moment, this change and all the rest of it has thrown a spanner in the works, but it would be good to get an update on that original invest to save strategy, whatever it was we had, where we set out the costs and what the benefits are going to be. I think that needs to be updated.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and that's the piece of work that we're doing now, to revisit that business case, look at the investments needed to be able to modernise, and look at the priorities for that investment, and how we best use that investment to get the organisation to where we need to be for, you know, our staff and the organisation. But that piece of work will come back to members.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor.
Thank you. I'm going to ask about the town hall in Lymington, which you probably expected. There were kind of two different main areas of concern that I wanted to raise, which are firstly kind of the town council's concern about the lease and about the future of the town council offices in Lymington, and also about the residents' concerns about the future of the information office, which is very much their main concern. So firstly, are you able to provide any clarity on the future of the information office at Lymington? And secondly, are you able to provide any sort of clarity on the lease arrangements with the town council in terms of that 2027 end date, and whether your plans for that are still the same, or whether that's going to be reviewed as part of kind of the more wider accommodation review, because I think it needs to be. But if you could just provide any sort of clarity, if you can, then that's great. If not, then you know, it's understandable, but I would like to have some. It's the kind of the not knowing which is kind of killing everyone at the moment in Lymington, because we don't know what's happening, and we'd like to have some indication from the council of what that the plans are, or not even the plans, just where the thinking is at the moment.
I'm probably not the best place to answer, but what I would say is it's still very early days. Alan, I don't know if you want to come in.
Yeah, I think it's exactly that, Becky and Councillor Davis. I know you're keen to understand the future of the town hall, as we all are. All I can say again at this point is that we are developing an asset strategy piece now. That's going to have a local government reorganisation focus and lens now over the medium term. So that will be the context in which we now write that strategy. Obviously, where we may have been heading prior to the white paper is now going to be different, but we haven't yet formalised or taken a firm view. And as I say, no formal decisions have been taken either way yet at this stage. As soon as we're ready, this panel will be the right remit for sounding some of those more strategic asset-based decisions at the right time. But yeah, can't give any confirmation, unfortunately, at this stage.
Thank you. I thought that might be the answer. When the idea is a bit, can you engage with the town council at as early a stage as possible on the future of that arrangement? Because that's something that I'm getting it in the neck from the town council.
Thank you. Yes, Becky, you'll be coming back at each meeting and giving updates on transformations, and we might get some about things that Alan wants come back next time. Right, so if I go to the recommendation on page 17, that the panel consider and review Q1 and Q2. Oh, no, I've gone forward one, sorry. Just to note yours. Thank you. Right, we actually now move on to item 7, which is the corporate plan, key performance data, and that's used, Zach.
Thank you, Chair. Sakib Yassin, I'm the Performance and Insight Manager, here to talk about the key performance indicators, or KPIs. These are integral to our corporate plan that's been signed up for 2024-2028. And last year, you may remember, we brought in our performance management framework, and that was approved at Cabinet, and that outlined our reporting and accountability commitments. As part of that accountability, Q1 and Q2 data, where available, is now presented back in the form of our dashboard. So the targets that are noted in the dashboard, these were reviewed by our executive management team, or EMT, in October last year. And an exercise was undertaken to ensure that the targets were appropriate, challenging, and had appropriate stretch targets where that was felt it was appropriate to do so. At that meeting, it was agreed that the quarterly dashboard of approved measures and targets be fed into our reporting cycle, which includes all panels. Just to, as it's the first time we're presenting the dashboard, just to, with reference to the appendix, to describe what that looks like. There are 48 KPIs in total presented on the dashboard. Each is organised by the corporate plan theme and then the priority. The portfolio holder, associated panel and data owner for each KPI is given. There is an indication of the desired direction of travel, and that tells us whether good performance is typified by an increasing or decreasing value. There is a return format which shows us the units of the value being reported. Frequency shows how often the KPI is to be provided. And this period, so we have values for Q1 that were relative to the beginning of the year baseline position. And now we have Q2 figures available relative to Q1. So in Q1, data was presented for 36 of the KPIs, including some annual figures. You'll see that 10 of the measures were pertinent to and marked for resources and transformation panels. And in Q2, 27 KPIs were presented, of which 9 were relevant to the resources and transformation. I wasn't proposing to go into the measures as such. I'll take questions in a moment. There is, of course, summary data within the covering report, and wherever we've had an amber or a red measure indicated in our dashboard, the service have provided appropriate mitigation and controls in the narrative accompanying the numbers. So I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Please note that this goes to all scrutiny panels and that we are just involved in the resource and transformation section of this, and please not deviate from that. Councillor Davies.
I'll try not to. I assume the prosperity section, does that cover us? So, say 28, 29, 30.
The portfolio holders are listed, so if it's the portfolio holder of Councillor Jill Cleary or Councillor Jeremy Heron, that's the remit for this panel.
Okay, that's fine then. I will leave my question then. Thank you.
So my only question and concern is that there are lots of the ones that for our panel that are, it's very hard to really judge and comment because there's a lot of NA in here. And with respect, the resident, there's a frequency of 2 years for one of the KPIs for the leader, which is resident satisfaction with council services. I think to properly judge them, hold them accountable and see how good or otherwise we're doing, we need to have them a little bit more regularly reported, because we as a scrutiny panel, if we focus on these two, we've got IT, which I appreciate is going very well, and I'd be probably more dramatically concerned if we'd had a rate for the not. But a lot of the leaders ones here are very hard to challenge and scrutinise, and the two that are in red, I would imagine, would fall under more of an HR committee area, and there is, within reason, there's probably things we can't bring up or shouldn't bring up here, other than what mitigation and what's in place to bring to improve those numbers, such as the vacancies. The other one to do with employee sickness, that's something that's for the HR committee, and it wouldn't be appropriate to ask. But those are the only two things we can really analyse here, because they're all NA, or they're not reporting, or nothing's matched up. And if we have these quarterly meetings, we need to have something more for us to scrutinise, I would imagine. But yes, it appears, as to say, the finance portfolio holder having all the IT he's quite lucky there, because everything's looking quite green. But
Thank you. It is difficult, and we've worked extensively to develop the KPIs following all of the engagement we've done, including with members on the corporate plan, and the same engagement exercise was done in setting the KPIs. So these have all been through the approval process, and we've landed at a set of KPIs that we feel are relevant. It's always difficult to get the balance between having KPIs that are specific to the things that we can always influence and produce regularly, but actually those things that are relevant to the district as a whole, so some things that we can try and influence, perhaps, and those measures that are reported infrequently, but still form a really important part of our corporate dashboard and tell a really good story. So there are a few perception measures within our dashboard that are formed from and defined as such from the resident survey. These are relatively frequent, but they are every 2 years. So, and that's the way they've been defined and agreed.
In response to that, my concern is the resident satisfaction with council services being every 2 years. And I'd be fascinated to see, rightly or wrongly, the impact of the answers when we bring in wheelie bins, obviously, because also you'll get 3 separate answers over 3 separate periods because of how we're rolling it out. So my neck of the woods, you wouldn't be able to, you'd see a nice comparison at this time next year while the first roll out phase 1. So I think for something so important with our residents, I take your point with the other ones, I think resident satisfaction every 2 years is far too long to properly be understood and managed. I take into account the wider issues we're not in control of, but while we can take control of those, surely something should be sooner or a shorter period than 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I was preparing to answer the previous question, but I'll come back on the, I think, resident surveys are very significant undertaking. It takes a lot of time. We do it well and independently and proportionately. So it's also about how much budget do you want to put in that process and making sure that we have time to really use the results from it and inform what we do. So that's the frequency that's been decided and is in the budget. More broadly, I guess what I was going to reflect on was your other point around how to scrutinise the performance of what's in this committee's remit. And I think perhaps you're correct that there isn't so many KPIs, but actually this scrutiny committee can, you do have a lot of other significant reports that come here covering a range of topics that are within the leader and the resources portfolio. So things like the Freeport transformation programme, all of the budget reports and so on. So, it is up to this committee how you scrutinise performance, of which KPIs is part, but also you're getting a lot of other performance coming here, complaints. There's a whole way that the data of the council comes to this committee, and it's up to you if you want to, from all of those different things, think about things that you want to work on proactively or ask for, other presentations to come back. So I just wanted to recognise your point that there isn't a lot of KPIs and so, reflect that you do have perhaps a broader range of reports than some other panels do to get your teeth into.
I take that on board, but with respect, and I won't get into the comments about scrutiny in the peer review, is that we are still a scrutiny panel that is politically relevant. So, even if I wanted to make a strong point from my end, getting united support on that moving forward comes up to the votes of my colleagues. You make a very valuable point about complaints report that we had. I would say to take that with officers, maybe that's something that could be combined with the resident satisfaction, because you point about the cost and the investment of doing it, very valid point, but surely the closest thing to combine that is the complaints coming in, and maybe that's something that's less resource intensive but could be utilised alongside the resident satisfaction as part of a sort of a KPI target, because these are the things that we want to hold ourselves accountable to, and we want them all in green. So, but people might have more faith in it if something that reported more regularly could just reassure us that it's all going well, particularly when we have big service changes as we have coming this year.
Thank you. Councillor.
Yeah, My question really revolves around something you said at the start of this, that we should only look at the items that are covered by this scrutiny panel. Well, it would be, I think, the way this information is presented, it would help then if those items were in some way colour-coded or something. I mean, we have these, am I misreading it? I mean, are they colour-coded?
Mine are colour-coded, so we've got
Yeah,
light
but are
blue.
you saying then that
Not colour coded by
what do the
committee.
We can
colours
take that
mean?
on board.
That's my question.
We take on board, I presume the paper one doesn't colour-code it.
No, they are colour, but what colour is this scrutiny?
I think there's an opportunity to make the data clearer, and this is the first time that you've seen it in this format. So any feedback on the format, how the data is presented that can make it clearer in the future, we'll happily take.
Oh, I'll have to go away
And that's
and look
another
at this. I'm being silly.
Councillor Woods.
I suppose when you look at any KPIs, you're drawn towards the red and under ours the average number of days sickness. Has that been caused by what's happening at the moment with devolution, or you know, any idea what the reasons for that are?
Hi, I've got an update. I mean, Councillor Wade's right that this is covered probably in more detail at HR committee, but I get the KPIs are coming here, so it falls probably to me then to give you a little bit of an update. I did ask similar questions in terms of what are we looking at a kind of trend. This data's from before there was any devolution or LGR conversation. In terms of tracking from HR, it's looking pretty similar in terms of the numbers of short term. In terms of long term, we have seen an increase. The sort of messaging from HR is that all of the long-term employees have to have a doctor's certificate. We know that the absences are therefore genuine, and we're working with managers to support them, you know, and help them address the long-term health issue. You know, from the head of paid service perspective, I would like to see lower levels of sickness, but you know, I know it's sometimes complex, and you're looking at how to provide help and support for people who have got a range of issues that mean that they're off on a long-term kind of health perspective. So I think looking at the data subsequently to those quarters, we are seeing a slight decrease, but it's still pretty much where it is. So.
I suppose the data is very much affected by long-term absence. That must throw it out quite quite a lot, I would have thought.
It does. It's why HR committee would be looking at the two factors in quite a lot of detail, because you know, somebody could be off, you know, for 6 months, and then that in one area that does have a big impact.
So it's got nothing to do with this devolution issue that's happening.
No, this is these figures are from before that, quarter 1 and 2.
Thank you.
Councillor Wade.
Also, we should account the next time we see those figures will be slightly misread, because unfortunately everyone seemed to have the cold and the flu everywhere I know worked and schools in the last. It was a flippant point, but it did seem to raise where I work, where my son goes to school, which is obviously you have to take into account. But what I would be fascinated to see in the next, when we allocate the new waste strategy in the 3 areas, is the percentage of that department, the waste strategy department, whether we are seeing more, less or the same answers, because obviously if the physical toll on that role, and whether the new service is accounting for more people having less time off through strains and injuries, and if actually it's proving to be a positive in that regard, that will be fascinating data. I'm sure the HR committee will have it, but that will be interesting to see if that has any impact on the numbers.
Councillor Woods.
Councillor Wade.
So I suppose when you look at any KPIs, you're drawn towards the red and the
Councillor Davies.
Yes, on the percentage of vacancies filled first time, that seems to be something where we're consistently struggling. Do you expect that to get significantly worse over the next year or two? Because the uncertainty that's going to become, or in fact, it might even get better because the certainty that will come. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, again, this is an issue that's been kind of rumbling for a while, I think, in terms of struggling to find staff. And it might just be a case of the New Forest being a difficult place to get people to work. But I was just wondering what the plans were for trying to improve that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll give my perspective. I think some of what Becky's already talked about in terms of the people strategy and the engagement and the training and the development, in that sense that we still are focused on being a great place to work, is part of that broader sort of staffing environment that will help retain people when they're potentially feeling unsure of the future. Also being very engaged proactively in those conversations is really important in terms of, enabling staff to have those opportunities. As we move forwards, there'll be opportunities to work with other colleagues around what is the future shape of those services going forwards. Specifically in terms of our vacancy information and recruiting first time, I think the latest figures do show it's getting a little bit better, but I think you're right, it will become more challenging, and potentially a tradition as we move forwards, the traditional approach of recruiting externally and expecting to be able to fill a post will become harder, and over time we will want to look at, for different roles, there might be different solutions that perhaps we wouldn't have thought about before. Once we're clearer what, if there is a reorganisation, what any future geography would be, what happened elsewhere was that you then start looking at what the broader pool of staff is, because clearly you don't want too many people recruited in who are then going to be restructured at some later point with consequences for current staff. And so then you start looking more flexibly around shared posts, secondments, interim resource, and how you can kind of manage that transition. But we're not there yet, but that is where you'd eventually start looking.
Councillor Davies now. Let's go to the recommendation on page 17, I think it is. Let's go to that. Which is that the panel consider a review of the Q1, Q2 dashboards. That's agreed. I have asked that they spread the dashboard over more pages so we can get a bigger font. But the summaries at the front were very useful, and I think we could do with more reports coming with summaries like that at the front. Now come to the highlight of the day, the portfolio holders' reports. Yes, Leader.
So I'm trying to turn the mouse on instead of the microphone. I've been representing the New Forest and our council's interests within wider discussions across Hampshire and the Solent. I have also reached out to our two MPs offering meetings. I'm working closely with all group leaders, and I'm pleased that we have now shared a view about how we move forwards. We are at an early stage in considering proposals around future reorganisation and await the government's letter to us expected this month that should include more details regarding criteria. A report will be coming forward to Cabinet on devolution in response to the government's letter. We know that delivering local services is not just around scale and size, but about local responsiveness and local identity. And I will be striving to ensure that any future proposals take this into account. We have many strengths as a council, and it is important to bring these into discussions around our future. This links to my update on the Corporate Peer Challenge. We were delighted to welcome the LGA team in December, and we are still waiting the final report. We were pleased that they reflected on the progress that has been made to modernise our work and encourage a culture of empowerment and collaboration, and that our ambition for our people and our place is clear. Also, that we need to recognise and celebrate our successes. We will be working through their recommendations and bringing this to the panel in March and on to Cabinet. I continue to champion our work to become an employer of choice, attending an employee forum and keeping an overview of the development of the people strategy. I know that HR committee had an update on this, and officers are now working to reshape the action plan in the light of potential reorganisation to ensure that we focus on the key priorities for our people. We will need to be both strategic and tactical over the next few months and years. We need to be flexible in reviewing our priorities and resource. And I know that with our members working with our staff, I am confident we have an organisation ready for challenge. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Very little to say, really. We were carefully planning through our strategic strategies on how to take forward particularly our corporate assets and how to deliver them, including the Lymington Town Hall, which obviously is keen to Councillor Davies' heart. And local and national government drove a coach and horses through it. We're now focused primarily on ensuring that we don't become a city extension. It's very interesting that I find that national government talk very much about the climate change emergency whilst trying to build busily over the lungs and heart of our farmland and destroy it. They seem to be a little schizophrenic to me. The future of the area is paramount, I think, to every member of this chamber, whichever national flag they fly politically. What we are now doing is working with our partners to ensure that what we do is to deliver a future that is the best that we can achieve against a national push for our residents and this exceptional area in which we live. It's a challenging time. We've only just started the journey. There isn't even any firm position that we're working to. There is no criteria that we need to work to deliver other than a broad range of number. But again, that broad range of numbers isn't set in stone, and there is no explanation as to how you can adjust and work to deliver the best results. So it is an incredibly challenging time, and that is where we're working for. And I think all members will be working for that. It will come back many, many times, not just to this panel, but to the full council, as we look. And I hope that all members, as I say again, whatever political flag they're flying, will challenge their MPs, their party, to make sure that we get the best result we can for this council and our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have your hand up, Alice?
Thank you. Age before beauty. I would just like to ask about the conversations you've been having, Leader, with Hampshire County Council. Have Hampshire County Council expressed a preference, or have we got any steer from them on what they would see as a sensible reorganisation here? Are they looking at Southampton or Eastleigh, or are they looking at Winchester and Test Valley? What's the steer? Because obviously the numbers suit Southampton and Eastleigh, but the perhaps cultural identity suits Test Valley and Winchester more. So I'm just wondering what the Hampshire position is, because obviously at the end of the day, they're the ones who will make that call. Thank you. And I do pity you.
Councillor Wade.
Sorry to continue the loving, but I do share. I'll be honest with you. Alan made the point earlier that we don't know yet if we have a multi-year funding review, and we thought a new council would bring in a new government would at least provide multi-year funding review. That should have been the priority, not a local government reorganisation paper that answered very few questions sent a week before Christmas. So I appreciate you have very few answers, and I also think it's cautious that we might have a preference of who we want to partner up with, councils that might be similar, have towns and parish councils in the areas, and have an understanding of their communities that mix smaller towns and villages rather than one large conurbation. But the reality is that might be out of our hands. So we have to manage expectations and say that we might end up partnered with our friends over the water, or we might not. That might be, and we have to be realistic, because there's a strong strength of feeling in our communities of one way or another. My main priority and concern to raise, and I'm sure you are, is that the senior leadership team, both staff and councillors, are reassuring and supporting staff who, with the greatest respect, councillors, we've got other issues, responsibilities in our lives. This is their livelihoods and their futures of all levels. And a lot of words in the programme were restructure, review, efficiencies. And those words were in there 10 times more than services, town, parish councils, long term. And it's my concern that, you know, rightly or wrongly, that staff will be concerned by this and the lack of answers. And as long as we are doing all we can to reassure them and be cognizant of that. And my second point is for Jill, what, if any, impact, and have you had any meetings with the group around Solent Freeport on the devolution, and is it impacting its current work stream or not?
It's not impacting its the Freeport. It's not impacting that at all at the moment. Whether it does later on the line, I do not know. Whether government starts then, once we've got a guideline, whether the government then starts taking other bits of work into consideration, I don't know. But please rest assured, the staff are so central in my heart that I still will champion being an employer of choice. I will still champion looking after our staff. They are the ones that face customers. They are the ones that interact with all our residents. And I really do have their welfare at really my core. Being here for 23 years, you can't not have that.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to add, we did have an indication, we have a meeting quite regularly, and the chair of the Solent Freeport indicated it was likely, the government has expressed the view that the governance of Freeport would move into the mayoral strategic authority, and the chair of the Freeport said that that wouldn't be something they would, disagree with. They exist because they were set up that way, but he said that they could see that there would be potentially a different governance going forwards. How that works is not yet clear in terms of what is then that governance of the mayoral strategic authority. And I think we were really clear that we would continue to be emphasising the need for benefits as we go forward still to be delivered to the areas of benefit that were originally defined, which would include that strong emphasis on the New Forest.
Thank you. Thank you, authority holders. We move on to item 9, which is the work programme. You'll find it slightly different than the last one. What I've tried to do is balance it a bit more so we don't get as long an agenda as we did at the last meeting. Is everybody happy with that? Thank you. I've got no urgent items. So the next meeting is the 20th of March. Thank you, everybody, for attending.